Joe Rogan's conversation with Wes Huff finally dropped, and it has Billy Carson punching the air in frustration. If you guys haven't been keeping up with the ongoing saga of Billy Carson versus Wes Huff, it has been one of the most intriguing and fascinating moments in internet history as far as I'm concerned. And it's all finally culminated to Wes Huff appearing on Joe Rogan's, the biggest podcast in the world, to articulate the reasons for his faith, share a bit of his story, his opinions on Jordan Peterson, and so much more. You guys should really go and watch the full conversation. Big props to Joe Rogan for platforming Wes Huff. But the thing that Joe Rogan says in the opening few minutes about Billy Carson is pretty disheartening for Billy and all of his fans. That Wes Huff really is at an intersection of having the best of both worlds. That though Billy Carson is viral and been on Joe Rogan and many platforms and podcasts before, their actual thoughts about him are not what people may perceive. And that ultimately, in my opinion, and probably in the opinion of others, Wes is really built for such a time as this. But before we get into that, guys, my name is Ruslan. This channel exists to encourage, empower, and inspire you to live a life that blesses God. Oftentimes that looks like us leaning into the conversations that are happening in the culture and adding a bit of commentary. So if you're new here, if you're not new here, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. As a huge percentage of the people that watch this channel, unfortunately, are not subscribed. All right, let's jump into the video. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the wait is over. The wait is over. Yes, Joe Rogan finally releases his conversation with Wes Huff. All the conspiracy theories can stop. All the badgering Joe Rogan in his Instagram comments can stop. You Christians need to stop doing that. What I want to see is people being thankful and sending gratitude to Joe Rogan for finally not just releasing this conversation, which took about a week, but also just for him platforming a guy like Wes Huff. I think this is a huge net positive. But it's not just a net positive for the Christian community. It's not just a net positive, in my opinion, for Joe Rogan, who, if Wes Huff doesn't close him on Jesus, I don't know who will. I think this is a net positive for the broader community around this entire space of YouTube. Where is the line between entertainment? Where is the line between education? Where is the line between experts versus people that just self-declare themselves as experts, which unfortunately is a lot of what Billy has done in this entire debate debacle. Now, we've covered it extensively. If you don't know the backstory of it, go look it up. It is fascinating. But what Joe Rogan says in the opening moments about Billy Carson, and specifically the conversation he had with Andrew Schultz, another fellow comedian with the Massive Podcast who also platformed Billy Carson, is incredible. Now, for the record, we'll probably do multiple clips of this conversation, but we wanted to hop into this very first one. This is right out the gate. Again, I'm excited to be looking at the entire whole of this conversation, but check this out. Right out the rip, Joe Rogan makes a pretty shocking statement in terms of what he has said to Schultz about Billy Carson.
It seems like he does not have that, and he is a wonderful talker, and it's a lot of fun. I like watching his videos. I love all that ancient history stuff, and even the most ridiculous tinfoil hat aspects of ancient. It's fun.
It's entertainment.
But I know that there's a different, like Andrew Schultz and I had a discussion about this. Like he said when he had Billy on the podcast, he said, we're not going to research anything. We're not going to search anything. We're not going to do anything. Just let him talk because it's fun.
Yeah.
So Rogan, out of the rip, is saying Billy Carson, the guy who a lot of people take seriously, the guy that almost every major podcast has platformed, is not to be taken seriously. It is primarily entertainment. He even says Schultz and them didn't do any research, and it shows in terms of how they approach that conversation. So what I appreciate about him is that he is intentionally out of the rip of this conversation making a categorical difference in terms of who Billy Carson is and who Wes Huff is. And I'm excited to bring you guys our very first 3-day conference called the Bless God Summit, happening March 27th, 28th, 29th in Southern California. And at this conference, we'll have your very own Preston Perry.
Me as an evangelist, I've made it up in my mind that I'm not going to leave people with an excuse not to serve Jesus.
Dr. Sean McDowell.
If there's one thing Christians should care about, it's truth.
Our vision with this conference is to equip, empower, and inspire people to do the work of the ministry that God has for them in this time. And at this conference, we'll have your very own Alan Parr and his wife, Jim Parr.
The number one reason, people want to get divorced because they want to find someone else who can make them happy. Now, what they don't realize, they're chasing the wind.
John McCrae from What Do You Mean?
What you may be shocked, or you may not be shocked to know, is that the majority of Christians in America, they don't know how to articulate the message of the gospel to non-believers.
Lila Rose.
Love
and marriage go together, that sex and marriage go together, that sex can bring life into the world. And that's an amazing thing. That's not a bad thing.
Trizzle Fitness.
Most people fail at dieting because they're just trying to lose weight too fast. What are you in such a rush for?
But where a lot of people get stuck is figuring out what it looks like to walk in that. And so these 3 pillars of our conference will be covering everything from apologetics to family in the home and the marketplace, and how you can lean into those 3 pillars to discover your calling on this side of eternity.
But when he was on with you, it was quite apparent that you are an actual expert in the Bible and in many religious texts, and that he didn't necessarily have the facts straight. So
Yeah.
what was the...
To say the least, didn't have the facts straight. I mean, that's the bare minimal in terms of what happened in that conversation. Again, go watch it. Shout out to Mark, shout out to Anton, shout out to Wes, shout out to everybody who made it happen. I feel like Christmas came early in terms of that moment happening and the amount of just utter nonsense that anyone with any basic understanding of the names of God in the Old Testament and the Hebrew could debunk a lot of Billy's claims. And we have done that, by the way, on this channel multiple times, myself, What Do You Mean, other Christian creators. So this goes without saying. This is very basic stuff. Now, let's see how Wes responds to this.
It's interesting you say the expert thing, because I literally was asked to do it 24 hours beforehand. So I had like the least amount of preparation going into it, and I was okay with that.
And Wesker was on to say this on a different video where he talked about how he's not going to be debating every other, skeptic, atheist, agnostic YouTuber, that in terms of someone that's made the claims that are as egregious as Billy Carson, it shouldn't require a ton of debate and prep if you just know the bare minimal stuff around textual criticism and some of the outlandish claims he made. So I greatly, greatly appreciate him pointing that out, because again, he's not the first one that's made rebuttal claims, but he is, by the grace of God, and I really believe it's the grace of God and the hand of God that positioned Wes to be available for a time as this and have the credibility and the expertise to take him down and make him submit and concede multiple times that, fair enough, if you say so. And again, go watch that debate.
Because I'd listened to Billy Carson. Well, and I listened to the stuff he'd said. So I knew enough about the ways that he'd articulated things about the ancient Near East and the Bible and Christianity to know enough that his level is pretty surface. But the fallout was that not only did he not want us to release the conversation, but then he started throwing out cease and desist letters. And then he started, trying to sue people.
And had he not done that, had he not gone with the cease and desist, trying to sue people, trying to suppress the story, this is called a Barbara Streisand effect, which Billy Carson was warned by. My man Mark, the moderator of that conversation, Anton, I think even warned him. He was warned by this, and he said, listen, if you go down this line, you're going to make this worse. And he went down the line, he made it worse, and now Wes is on the Joe Rogan podcast. He's about to do a bunch of other massive podcasts. Billy made this mess. Had Billy just let this come out, yeah, the Christian community would have some fun with it. Yeah, it may have hurt his credibility a little bit, but it wouldn't have catapulted Wesley Huff to the degree that he is at right now in terms of this finally coming out. This is 2 hours out, and it has over 142,000 views, right? 12,000 likes. This is Billy's fault. Billy made this mess of a bed. Billy gets to lay in this bed. This is on Billy. This isn't on anybody else. And oftentimes I do believe that God will use a Billy Carson, use someone that's far gone, use someone that's what I would call an enemy to the gospel, to platform and build up someone like Wes Huff being on the biggest podcast in the world with a Joe Rogan who has his own spiritual journey with God in the background, and I'll spare you all those details, but there's been a progress publicly, and some say even a progress privately that Joe Rogan's been going through. And I think, again, for such a time as this, that's a famous verse from Esther. This is incredible.
So, I mean, I was never worried because I'm a Canadian, and anybody who's tried to sue internationally knows that...
Good luck.
Yeah, right. Yeah. As far as I understand it, he would have had to file a claim in a Canadian court that would have been reviewed to have legal precedence. But he'd have to prove that he could win.
I think at the very least, Billy Carson, if you're watching this, you need to step down and apologize to Mark, Anton, Wes. Stop it with these frivolous lawsuits. You can get in trouble for the slap lawsuits in the state like Florida. The only way in terms of him changing this narrative is by him repenting. Now, I think Billy Carson's not too far from the grace of Jesus. I think this would be a beautiful poetic twist to have this come full circle and him finally submit his life to Jesus and walk in the fullness thereof. But I think this is a great moment.
What was his argument?
Apart from the fact that he was embarrassed that he lost?
Well, yeah, that's not really an argument, right? We've all been there.
Yeah, the cease and desist letter said, I don't want you to use my name or my face.
He tried to take back consent after verbally, clearly consenting to being on camera. He said that you can't use his name and likeness and reverse consent. You can't do that. You can't do this. He has no case.
If you're a public figure, he's clearly a public figure.
Right.
Is that even?
No.
Can you actually say no?
No, you can't do it.
So what was the? Does he have a lawyer that wrote this cease and desist?
So he actually, it's interesting because Mark Menard, who was the guy who
Shout out to Mark. That's who Billy Carson showed up to his house at 2:30 in the morning with a cease and desist letter. This by the way, again, if you're just not getting hip to this, man, you really got to go back and look at the build up to this. Him being on Rogan is not an accident.
He sent Mark a handwritten one. And then he eventually gave Mark an official one from his lawyer. So I actually was sent one by his lawyer, which I, screenshotted, posted publicly online and said, I'm going to ignore this. And then, but he'd sent Mark, who was the podcast host, as far as I'm aware, numerous cease and desists, and Anton, who was the media manager. He'd sent a number of cease and desists.
It's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate.
Super unfortunate.
When you get caught with your pants down, you're supposed to say, I got caught with my pants down. Yeah. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
It's the only, especially if you're public. Like, it's very clear that you're incorrect.
Well, the irony of the situation is if he just kind of left it, it probably wouldn't have made anywhere close to the splash that it's made. And we told him that. We said, like, hey, Barbra Streisand effect is going to happen.
That's right. I just said
like,
that.
you're a big enough personality that if I make a video and say, like, hey, I had this conversation, didn't go well for Billy, and Billy doesn't want it released, that's going to start to gain traction sooner or later.
Yep. And multiple people tried to warn him of this, including him and Mark, who were friends. And unfortunately, Billy didn't listen. And these are the consequences of not listening to your friends. So I want to hear from you guys. Those of you guys that saw the whole conversation, those of you guys that are planning to look forward to the whole conversation, let me know what parts of it stood out. Let me know if there's any specific parts you want us to react to. I can't wait to jump into this whole thing. But the news is it's out. So go show Joe Rogan some love, send him some encouragement. Gratitude is the way we lead with this as followers of Jesus, so that by the grace of God, perhaps we will see more Wes Huffs on Joe Rogan. Perhaps we will see a William Lane Craig. Perhaps we will see other folks, other pastors even. Maybe pastors from the Austin, Texas area come on Joe Rogan's podcast. Send him some love, send him some encouragement. And if you guys want to see some of our coverage of this whole thing, we'll have that pinned over here. If you want more information about our Blessed God Summit coming up March 27, 28, 29, we'll have that pinned over here. I'll see you guys over there, all right? Peace.